In the summer of 2018, an extravagant wedding took place in California. The groom was 72-year-old billionaire Harold Whitmore, a powerful business mogul with an empire spanning real estate, luxury goods, and pharmaceuticals. The bride was 29-year-old Samantha Roy, a strikingly beautiful transgender woman known for her modeling career and influential social media presence. Their whirlwind romance had captivated high society, sparking whispers and speculation. Harold's 3 children, especially his eldest son, Richard, a corporate attorney, were furious. The speed of the marriage, Samantha's past, and their father's vulnerability made them suspicious. But Harold was infatuated. He drowned Samantha in wealth, jewelry, a penthouse, an extravagant honeymoon in Hawaii. Social media painted them as the picture of newlywed bliss. But behind the closed doors of their exclusive oceanfront suite, things were unraveling. Hotel staff noticed Samantha's growing irritation, her sharp tone, the way she dismissed Harold in public. One night, after he accidentally spilled wine on her designer dress, she stormed out of a restaurant, muttering expletives under her breath, calling him a useless old man. More troubling were the late-night phone calls, her frequent disappearances, and the unidentified young man she was seen meeting in the hotel's private lounge. Security footage captured their encounters. Intense conversations, hushed voices. There was no proof of an affair, but there was something coldly methodical in her actions. Then, 3 weeks into their stay, the fairy tale shattered. Hotel staff found Harold unconscious in the suite, his body battered, bruises stark against his pale skin. Samantha was hysterical, claiming he had suffered a heart attack. But paramedics noticed inconsistencies. The bruising wasn't natural. His wrists bore signs of restraint, and the scene itself, the overturned furniture, the shattered glass, spoke of something violent. Despite resuscitation efforts, Harold was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation that followed would send shockwaves through the business elite. Authorities pieced together his final hours, uncovering chilling details. The evening of August 24, 2018, had started like any other. Witnesses saw the couple at the hotel's fine dining restaurant. Harold, dressed in a crisp linen suit, sipped red wine, seemingly at ease. Samantha, in a fitted designer dress, barely looked up from her phone. Their conversation was strained. A waiter recalled how Harold had reached for her hand, only for her to pull away sharply, rolling her eyes. "Just eat, Harold," she muttered, her tone dripping with contempt. Hours later, security footage captured her storming out of the suite at 10:30 p.m., visibly agitated. She ordered a cocktail at the bar, speaking heatedly into her phone. A bartender overheard parts of the conversation. The words "done soon" and "getting tired of this" stood out, but at the time, it seemed like nothing more than frustration. Meanwhile, Harold was alone in their suite. Hotel records show that he ordered a bottle of aged whiskey just before midnight, odd for a man who rarely drank heavily. When the attendant delivered it, Harold stood by the balcony, staring into the ocean, silent and withdrawn. At 12:45 a.m., Samantha returned. She slammed the door behind her. What happened next would remain a mystery, until the horrifying truth surfaced. By 2 a.m., guests in adjacent rooms reported hearing a commotion, loud thuds, muffled shouting, the sounds of an argument escalating into something more violent. A woman's voice, believed to be Samantha's, was heard, her words sharp with frustration. Then the crash of glass, a sickening thud. Silence. At 3:10 a.m., a frantic 911 call came from the suite. The question remained: was Harold's death a tragic domestic dispute that spiraled out of control, or had it been something more sinister? A carefully orchestrated plan masked as a crime of passion? The truth was about to surface, and it was far darker than anyone could have imagined. At 3 a.m., the air outside the Whitmore suite felt heavy, almost electric. A guest in a neighboring room, unable to sleep due to the muffled sounds filtering through the walls, stepped onto his balcony, hoping the cool breeze would bring him some relief. Instead, his gaze was drawn to the sheer curtains of the penthouse suite, where shadows moved violently, erratically. The figures behind them twisted and lunged, shapes colliding in a silent war. For a moment, he considered calling hotel security. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the movement stopped. An eerie silence swallowed the room. The guest lingered, listening. No more muffled voices, no more crashes, nothing. He exhaled and shook his head. Probably just a drunken fight between newlyweds, not his business. He went back inside, locking the balcony door behind him. Inside the Whitmore suite, the floor was slick with spilled liquor. Shards of glass glinted under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, which now hung at an awkward angle. One of its bulbs shattered. The once luxurious honeymoon suite had become a crime scene. Harold Whitmore lay on the floor, his breathing ragged, his face swollen and bruised. Blood trickled from a wound just above his temple, pooling onto the cold marble tiles. At 3:15 a.m., the door opened, and Samantha Roy stepped out. Her posture was rigid, her fingers tightening around the edges of her silk robe. She looked down, at her hands for a moment, then wiped them against the fabric before lifting her phone to her ear. The call she made was urgent, her voice clipped and fast. Within 10 minutes, the paramedics arrived. The hotel staff barely had time to react as the medical team rushed past them, flinging open the suite's doors. What they found inside stunned them. Harold's body lay limp on the floor, the color drained from his skin. Samantha, now in full hysterics, screamed that he had suffered a heart attack, that he had been drinking too much, that she had tried so hard, to save him. But the scene told a different story. A toppled chair, streaks of red on the pristine, white sheets, the shattered remains of a whiskey glass near Harold's head, a broken lamp lying a few feet away, its jagged edges sharp enough to slice skin. The paramedics exchanged wary glances. This wasn't a simple medical emergency. By 3:30 a.m., Harold was rushed to Queens Medical Center in critical condition. The injuries catalogued upon his arrival painted a brutal picture. Multiple fractured ribs, severe internal bleeding, blunt force trauma to the skull. The doctors treating him weren't fooled. They quietly made a call to law enforcement. Back at the hotel, officers arrived to secure the suite. Stepping cautiously through the wreckage of the night's violence, they observed the details, the shards of glass, the bloodstains, the faint handprint smeared along the nightstand as if someone had tried to steady themselves. One officer bent down, inspecting the broken whiskey bottle. The way the glass had splintered suggested it had been swung with force, deliberately. Then there was Samantha. Despite her tearful display, something about her was off. Her silk dress remained unwrinkled, her long curls still perfectly in place. Not a single smudge in her expertly applied makeup. The only mark on her was a faint scratch on her left arm. Nothing else. The officers noted it. When questioned, her responses were erratic, her emotions fluctuating between frantic sobs and unsettling composure. She repeated the same lines over and over. He was drinking. He got dizzy. He collapsed. She barely slept, trying to keep him from overindulging. But when asked about the noise reported by other guests, the shouts, the sound of breaking glass, her story shifted. Just a small argument, nothing serious. At 5:10 a.m., Harold briefly regained consciousness. A detective, having arrived at the hospital minutes earlier, saw his opportunity. He leaned in, speaking low, urgent. "Did someone hurt you?" Harold's lips barely moved, but the word was unmistakable. Samantha. By 5:45 a.m., Harold Whitmore was dead. His official cause of death, blunt force trauma leading to a fatal brain hemorrhage. The case had shifted. What had first appeared as a tragic accident was now a full-fledged homicide investigation. Detectives wasted no time retracing the final hours of Harold Whitmore's life. The forensic analysis only confirmed what they already suspected. His injuries weren't from a single fall. They were the result of sustained violence. The bruises on his ribs suggested multiple, repeated blows, far beyond what a mere accident could have caused. Defensive wounds on his arms told an even darker story. He had fought back. And then there was the text. A single message sent from Samantha's phone at 12:48 a.m., hours before Harold's death. It was addressed to an unidentified number. "It's almost done. Be ready." It was all detectives needed to dig deeper. Phone records revealed that Samantha had made several calls that night to a man named Ethan Cole, a 32-year-old former fitness trainer, a man with a known history of fraud and manipulation, a man who, as it turned out, had been staying in the same hotel, just 2 floors below. Security footage sealed her fate. Samantha and Ethan had been seen together, not once or twice, but multiple times over the past few days. Late-night meetings in secluded areas of the resort, intimate conversations over candlelit drinks. And on the night of Harold's death, Ethan had been spotted near the elevator, heading toward the penthouse suite. Detectives delved further into Samantha's background. The image she had carefully curated, the glamorous social media influencer, the devoted wife, was a lie. Her past was riddled with financial scandals, failed business ventures, and lawsuits from former lovers who accused her of deceit and extortion. Her lifestyle was funded by wealthy benefactors, men she charmed and manipulated. Harold Whitmore had simply been her most lucrative investment. At dawn, the police found her in the hotel lounge. She sat alone, staring into a half-empty glass of water, her fingers curled tightly around the rim. When the officers approached, she barely reacted. She didn't ask why they were there. She didn't protest. At the station, Samantha stuck to her story. Harold had been drinking. He had lost his balance. She had tried to save him. But as the evidence stacked against her, as the detectives laid out the forensic report, the security footage, the text messages, her demeanor changed. The grieving widow act faded. What was left was something colder, more calculating. When pressed about Ethan, she hesitated, then dismissed him as a distant acquaintance. But it was too late. The autopsy confirmed everything. Harold's death had not been accidental. The final blow, the one that had ended his life, had been deliberate. The whiskey bottle, now bagged as evidence, had Samantha's fingerprints all over it. By noon, the police were ready. The charges were filed. As the world awoke to the news, the story of Harold Whitmore's murder spread like wildfire. The billionaire's glamorous young wife, once the picture of devotion, was now a prime suspect in his brutal killing. And somewhere in the city, Ethan Cole had disappeared, but he wouldn't be able to hide forever. The break in the case came when investigators unearthed a financial trail that shattered any illusion of coincidence. This was no impulsive act of passion. It was deliberate, precise. Cold bank records exposed a damning transaction. Just days before Harold Whitmore's death, Samantha Roy had wired $50,000 to Ethan Cole. The payment was disguised as a consultation fee, but the investigators knew better. It was blood money. Surveillance footage from a nearby ATM added another nail to the coffin. Ethan, his face drawn and anxious, was seen making large withdrawals in the dead of night. When detectives finally caught up with him, he was hastily checking out of his hotel, a packed duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He had hoped to disappear before the walls closed in, but he was already too late. Brought in for questioning, Ethan played the part of the innocent man. He claimed Samantha had hired him as a personal trainer, nothing more. But when detectives laid out the evidence, call logs, financial records, the frequent late-night meetings, his carefully crafted story unraveled. Then came the final, unassailable piece of proof, a voice recording extracted from Samantha's phone, conversation captured 2 nights before Harold's murder. Samantha, he's getting suspicious. We need to do this soon. Ethan, are you sure about this? If something goes wrong? Samantha, nothing will go wrong. He's old, weak. One push, one hit, and it's over. Then we disappear. The room was silent as the recording ended. Ethan went pale. His shoulders sagged. He exhaled, long and unsteady. Then he confessed. According to Ethan, Samantha had orchestrated the murder from the very beginning. Marrying Harold had been nothing more than a calculated step toward his wealth. But time was running out. His health was deteriorating too slowly. And worse, he had been planning to change his will. If she didn't act soon, she would walk away with nothing. The plan had been simple. stage an accident, inherit the fortune, vanish before anyone suspected a thing. But that night, things had spiraled. A drunken argument had turned violent. Samantha, no longer willing to wait, had grabbed the nearest object, a whiskey bottle, and struck Harold. When he staggered but didn't fall, she hit him again and again, until he crumpled to the floor, blood seeping into the pristine white carpet. Panicked, she called Ethan. His advice had been detached, clinical. Make it look medical, call for help, cry. By the time paramedics arrived, Harold was already gone. With Ethan's confession, the financial records, and the autopsy report, law enforcement had more than enough to act. On the evening of August 26, 2018, detectives arrived at the luxury resort where Samantha was still staying. By then, she knew the noose was tightening. She had spent the day avoiding reporters, retreating into self-imposed isolation. When the officers knocked, she answered in a silk robe, her expression carefully curated, half surprise, half innocence. "Miss Roy," Detective Mark Holloway said, voice firm, "we have a warrant for your arrest for the murder of Harold Whitmore." For the briefest moment, the mask cracked. Her pupils dilated. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. But then, just as quickly, she slipped back into character. "This is a mistake," she murmured. "I loved my husband." The officers ignored her. The cuffs clicked around her wrists. As they led her through the hotel lobby, a swarm of journalists erupted, cameras flashing. Samantha, ever the performer, kept her expression unreadable. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole had already been transferred to a holding facility. His cooperation meant prosecutors would offer him a deal in exchange for his testimony. He had no more loyalty to Samantha. She had used him, and now he would return the favor. The media sees the story. The glamorous socialite turned cold-blooded murderer. The desperate, manipulated lover. Had she planned Harold's death from the start? Was Ethan an accomplice or merely another pawn? Then, more disturbing revelations. Samantha's past was a trail of broken relationships. Men who had lost fortunes, reputations, everything. No deaths linked directly to her, but always whispers of financial ruin, legal battles, mysterious disappearances. The trial became one of the most closely watched in recent history. Prosecutors meticulously laid out their case. Ethan took the stand and, under oath, detailed every step of Samantha's plan. The jury heard the voice recording. "Harold won't live to see next month." Samantha's defense flailed. They painted her as a grieving widow, unfairly vilified. They claimed Ethan was lying to save himself, that Harold's injuries could have been the result of a drunken fall. But the evidence was insurmountable. After only 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Samantha sat still, hands resting in her lap. No outburst, no tears. As if she had already made peace with the inevitable. The judge, citing the premeditated nature of the crime, sentenced her to life without parole. Ethan Cole, having turned state's witness, received 12 years. He had never laid a hand on Harold, but his involvement made him complicit. Harold's daughter, who had never trusted Samantha, later revealed something chilling. Harold had been days away from amending his will, cutting Samantha out entirely. A coincidence? Or the final proof that greed had been her only motivation all along? Even as Samantha sat in her prison cell, awaiting transfer, she remained silent. No confession, no remorse. Just the cold, vacant stare of a woman who had come terrifyingly close to getting away with murder.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.